Okay, we're recording and we're live.
Okay, thank you. So welcome to the board work session and executive session tonight. Today is Monday, February 22nd, 2021. I would like to call this meeting to order. Okay, and Madam Clerk, could you please do the roll
We're
call?
recording, we're live.
Trustee
Okay,
Claudia
thank you.
Swastiki, here.
So welcome to the board work
Trustee
session.
Andrew Butler,
Here.
Trustee Manuel Bodina,
Here.
Vice Chairman Travis Manning,
Here.
Madam Chair Maricela Pacina.
Here. Okay, thank you. If you'd like to all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Okay, so Madam Clerk, could you please read the board meeting agenda postings?
Madam Chair Pacina and trustees, I request the approval of the Board of Trustees Board Work Session and Executive Session Agenda posting for Monday, February 22nd, 2021. The original agenda was posted on Friday, February 19th, 2021 at 3:13 p.m. The agenda was posted at the school district, on the school district website and at the Caldwell District Office.
Thank you. And I would like to ask at this time for a motion to receive the agenda posting report.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve and accept the agenda postings for February 22nd, 2021.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to ask for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, motion carries. All right, and so today on our board work session agenda, the first thing that we have is the community schools update. So Dr. French.
Thank you, Madam Chair and trustees. We have Hortensia is here with us, who is our community school liaison. And we asked her to provide an update of what is happening with community schools. And then I'll follow up after her. We can visit about future of community schools and what we see happening in the Caldwell School District as we move forward. So I'll turn it to Hortensia.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice actually that there's a virtual option for me to still be there. So I don't get to miss out on this opportunity to share with you all about what is happening and kind of what I see as a vision for our community school expansion, the Caldwell School District. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so I am going to share my screen with a.
Can you wait just one moment? Let's make,
Yep.
Just a second.
just one moment.
Allison's gonna help me.
Okay, so she's ready. She can share her screen now.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Go ahead and share your screen.
Okay. Okay, let me make sure I can do this. Okay. All right, and so you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this is, I will share a disclaimer. This is kind of based on the knowledge and the amount of expertise I've accumulated over now almost 4 years of really investing into the community school strategy. So this is the vision of community schools in the Caldwell School District. And I'll share also a little bit about how our community school strategy has supported our families, especially during the pandemic. And so I think it's important for us to recognize the why behind why really expand the community school strategy within the Caldwell School District. And for one, the community school strategy is a driver of equity. And so that really means removing the barriers to our family and our student success. So really knowing that, for all our families, the amount of opportunities or accessibility will differentiate and be different. And so it's really being able to remove those barriers. And the community school strategy is a systems change. So when we look at this, we really have tried to do things at Sacagawea in the past 4 years on a best practice model, based off of data, based off of the national recommendations from the coalition for community schools. And so when we look at systems changes within the school building and within its environment, we look at how community schools strategy affects mobility, how it affects the mental and behavioral health of our kids and families. So it's really looking at those two things of equity and systems change. And I think reminding ourselves, and especially I think Mr. Webster and I have done a pretty good job of really reminding ourselves that we're the connectors versus the providers. Well, for one, Caldwell and the Treasure Valley is filled with so many resources and individuals and organizations that are always willing to say yes and are always willing to come to the table to really rethink the way that they serve families, or just to talk about new ideas of is there a different way we can do this, or what's missing? Where can we fill in the gap? And so we recognize that there are so many experts out there in so many different fields, that our biggest role in this is being the expert in connecting and building relationships. So as the team of the school administration knows, 5 years ago when the strategy, when this all started, there were certain qualifiers of how Sacagawea was identified. And now I think with knowing, and that's really one of the advantages of doing this now for so long, is we're not really going into this like, what does this look like? Especially since the strategy was so new back in the day. We really had no idea of what this was going to look like, of what we were wanting it to do for the Caldwell families. But now that we have this wealth of knowledge, we can really identify the next schools with these qualifiers. So first of all, it's that school buy-in. Mr. Webster and I, we meet every week. I have built relationships and have really fostered and nurtured those with our staff, with our community, with our parents, and have really bought in and have really made the community school strategy a part of the school culture. The second thing that we could look at would be a needs assessment. Each individual school in the Caldwell School District will have individual needs that will differentiate between school. And so we really need to know what those needs are, what their fires are, and what those would look like, and how the community school strategy could impact and address those needs. And secondly, we could look at a resource map. Chris Stanley, through Caldwell Health Needs Assessment years when this all first started, divided out Caldwell within census tracts that really dug into food deserts, that dug into what the earnings were based off of from one census tract to the other, what health factors impacted one population versus the other. So when we look at this resource map, but also looking at what resources does the school already have, how can we build off of those? And then what resources around the school exist and what's missing? And so based off of these qualifiers and of course others but I think really based off of these three qualifiers, we could look into next steps. And so again, disclaimer, this is just based on the information that I know and kind of how I could see this fold out. Potential next schools. And so for me, my dream, if I was in charge of the world, it would be every school in the Caldwell School District would be a community school. Because I truly believe that every kiddo in every phase of their educational journey needs that whole child approach in supporting their educational journey and supporting their family throughout these stages. As a Caldwell School District parent personally, I know how important preschool is because my son did 2 years and I'm seeing the impact that's having in his first year in kindergarten during the pandemic. And so we know that from the very get-go, I hope that he and his peers have that support until they get into, high school and beyond. But looking at those qualifiers and thinking realistically, what could this look like? I could say possibly Sacagawea feeds into Syringa, so that's already feeding into one of the middle schools. So we could look into Wilson. Wilson could be a next target school where half of its population, half of Farmway students go to Wilson, where we could look into co-locating services or doing programming at Farmway versus Wilson. So therefore we could also target Lewis and the other half of Farmway students that go to Lewis and Clark. There has been, I have been able through my job to be able to build relationships with other staff in other schools. So knowing that there's staff members at Wilson that have said, how do we make this happen here? Or where can we find one of you? Knowing that there's that staff buy-in or, that conversation has started. And secondly, and lastly, Wilson feeds into Jefferson. One of the things that we hope to one day be able to explore is that opportunity of really gathering data around our fifth graders, sharing that with our middle school. And so that way they're better prepared to handle some of our, some of that social emotional, luggage that these kiddos take to that next tier in their education. And then lastly, Canyon Springs would be a great fit because they have so many caring adults in their building that are doing so much of this work that for them, having an individual really focus in on the work could allow the individuals that are doing this work really focus on their job and kind of really take off some of those stressors and some of that workload. One of the biggest things that I have tried to do in my job is to not add additional things to Mr. Webster's plate, but to actually remove things from his plate. So he can really he can really do what he needs to do. And so I think with Canyon Springs and the fact that they're already going in this direction, they would be a great fit for a community school strategy. And so this is, and we can look at this based off of, if you see on the map, Sacagawea is at the most northern school, Lewis and Clark's, down at the south, and we could approach it that way, but these are just some kind of based on what I've seen and, the amount of data around this and the level, just kind of what direction we could possibly go. Realistically, I think it'd be cool. I mean, I don't know realistically, but I think it would be pretty neat if we could have, community school in every elementary school and then build into a middle school. And the cool thing about Canyon Springs, and, now that we're building off of this, is that we no longer, there's templates already put into place for this. We don't have to build the boat or build whatever, as we go. There's already been a template put in place, so we can just adapt it to the very specific needs of each school. So with that in mind, I'll switch over a little bit to how did our community schools support our families during the pandemic? And just a quick reminder, these 5 priorities are what we really try to focus at our community school work at SAC. And so one of the things is we have been a summer lifeline to a lot of our families, even before the pandemic. I get to work throughout the summer, which I find it to be actually a pretty cool privilege, where these relationships that I have built through the community school strategy allow for families to know exactly who they can reach out to one, simply get questions answered, but 2, be able to be directed, or what we have established as a soft handoff. Most times when you refer or when you tell a family about a resource or you're trying to get them connected to a dental provider, sometimes there's so many little barriers in between all that what's missing is just a connection from one contact that they trust to another contact that trusting person is sending them to. And because of the strategy, that not only does it, is sometimes leads programs or initiatives, but really comes in and supports. We were able to support our STEM camp that we did this summer. We were able to continue doing a book and a bite in a safe manner where partners said, we still want to help. How can we do this safely? And so we were still able to do all these things because we had a system in place where our families really trusted us and knew exactly where they could go to get this information and this help. One thing that we have really flourished on was our Canyon Hill support. And I mean that directly in regards to our faith groups that we have on the Hill. they have been continuous hand raisers in every aspect of our community school strategy work. But one of the things that has really turned over in regards to the direct impact on families was their willingness to listen to what our families' needs are. And especially when we started remote and we were going to yellow, to that hybrid model, we knew that families were going to have to figure out that childcare component, that, just those 3 hours before they came to school or those 3 hours after school. And one of the churches on the Hill met with us almost weekly to kind of figure out how can we put together a childcare just specifically for those families, for those 3 hours. And even though it wasn't something we could pull off, it was still their willingness to come around and still figure out, by donating over 500 face masks to our staff, that still to this day will come in and grab whatever face mask they need for that kiddo that sometimes forgets it every day, or for their class, just to make sure that they have extras. And so, we've had, later on, I'll share a different way one of our faith groups has supported us, but our families have this entire village that really wraps around them and supports them, and are willing to adapt the way that they serve families to meet the needs of our families. I'm sure you guys have, you're up to date with the hotspots, but the hotspots story for us is a little bit unique. And so because of the community school strategy, and because we knew we were coming into red, it was a conversation Mr. Webster and I were having, I think July, like, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna support our families with internet? And so we knew at that time, August, that we didn't have an answer, but I became an expert in service providers and who had these deals and how to apply or where to call. We tried to figure out the fastest number to get directly to customer service. And so throughout these months, and so actually now, January, we were able to provide 20 hotspots, but it's what happened in those 5 months before January 1st. And that was really identifying what families needed this. We went through a checklist of getting them information about internet providers, helping them apply for the Strong Family, Strong Students grants, letting them know of the Wi-Fi options that they had through the district, through the city. And then once January 1st came, and what happened was we built this relationship with T-Mobile and Evergreen Heights Mennonite Church as the face of our hotspot. Was we knew that removing this one barrier was going to alleviate so many struggles for so many families. And I am pretty happy to say that, so these about 20-ish kids that are off of our hotspots, close to 90% of them have improved their attendance. And for some of these kids, there had been absolutely no learning during remote because this was their one barrier. And as soon as we were able to connect them, and we built this system that allowed for them to connect, they haven't missed a day, or they're really trying their hardest to catch up. And so, and because I have this position of being able to focus in on these 20 kids, I check in weekly with their teachers to make sure that they're logging in. We did add a stipulation for very, very few students of, making sure that they, we added an attendance stipulation, but the point is to really kind of push them to getting their work done, to, doing their best with the time that they've had, because we know that even though it was just Wi-Fi, it was a much, much bigger issue than just that. We did a community resource event just a couple weekends ago. And what this really taught us was, one, our families really missed this. We had to go through a list of things to make sure that it was COVID appropriate, and it was a lot of work, but we were able to successfully give out close to 40 bikes. We still gave out flu shots even at the tail end of the season. We gave out over 55 food boxes to families. And what they told us is they are more willing to come to the school once a month to pick up their food than they are to go elsewhere. But there has to be a reason why. We have less families accessing flu shots at SAC than elsewhere. And it's probably because flu shots you can get it at the pharmacy, you can get it at Walgreens, you can get it at Albertsons. It's really everywhere. But even just knowing that there's a lot of food banks in Caldwell, there's still something missing there. And so that's where our community school strategy jumps in and says, how can we fill this gap? Because our partners say we can come out here once a month, but there's still someone out there already doing the job, and how can we connect our families to those partners out in our community? And lastly, I have to say, none of this work could be done again without our stakeholders. And what COVID has proved is their buy-in to the community school strategy and to the families at Sacagawea and the staff at Sacagawea, because they continue to meet with me virtually even, and are willing to raise their hand and help in whatever way, shape, or form that they can. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't take too much, but I will stop sharing my screen, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Hortensia. We appreciate your presentation. Trustees, do you have any questions for Mrs. Hernandez?
So will the community school model be expanded anytime soon?
Good question. Madam Chair and Trustee Swastiki, Hortensia, I will help answer that. So we asked Hortensia to prepare a vision of what it could be, because we've seen the benefits of it during COVID, during the pandemic for Sacagawea, and how the families of Sacagawea have felt supported along the way, that have needed those resources. So we met with Hortensia. We do want Hortensia to continue the work of community schools. United Way is not able to continue it through their funding mechanism. So we anticipate that Hortensia will become a Caldwell School District employee here very shortly. That's our goal. I just want to make sure she knows that. But no, we have met with her. But when we did meet with her, we're like, what could this look like? And maybe it will take us a few years to grow. But Hortensia has been thinking about this, I would guess, for the last several years. As other schools have reached out to her, PTOs have wanted to know how to get that help and the resource. So I feel that as soon as Hortensia becomes a CSD employee, that focus will be on Caldwell School District. I feel from the school board, and trustees, you may have to pull me aside, I just feel there's support for community schools from the trustees. And I think you see the benefit of that for the students that have been served in Sacagawea. So we want to put together a futuristic look of what it might be. Financially, it is that's something where the board, as we work on that budget, April may ask you, what's your priority? And we're going to prioritize a position for Hortensia so that we have her, continuing the work in Caldwell. But we do see it going forward. I don't know if that answers your question, Trustee Swastiki, but we're just very grateful for this work, and we're grateful for United Way for the work that they have done to bring it to Caldwell and to introduce us all to something. A parent told me she wonders why this is novel. She feels like schools they are the center of the community. So I thought that was an interesting take on it. Thanks, Hortensia, for letting me jump in.
Thank you.
And from my perspective, because I remember going with Hortensia to Utah when United Way sent us to look at some different community schools in the Utah area, Salt Lake and South Salt Lake area. And we were really impressed at how they have their communities have benefited from this. And I know that on the plane ride back, Hortensia I felt she was kind of giddy, like, okay, we're gonna start doing something. And she was just starting the wheels turning, and so now we're here, and I'm impressed and I'm amazed that the community around Sacagawea has come in to help with the gardening, the summer garden that you have going on, and all these other, the childcare and with the hot spots and everything. And I think it's great that I feel that, we have our stakeholders, we have a lot of folks that will help. And you don't have to be a big corporation to help. I mean, that would be great, because we'll accept your dollars or whatever. But, even people around the community that can just give a little bit will help make our community school model that much better. So I just want to express how grateful I am for those people. Any other comments, trustees? questions?
So thank you, Hortensia, for all the work. It is hard work, but you have that passion and drive that's impressive. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. It started at the Y.
I think it started in Parma.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Webster, as well.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Hortensia.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes,
So I'm thinking about a community schools model and all the benefits it brings, and I'm thinking about some of the unknowns in our immediate future, you know, with school enrollments kind of fluctuating for several different reasons. I suppose mainly because of COVID, also because of the influx of some other schools in the area. And so just thinking about budgets and you know, what sort of time, maybe this is Mrs. Burton's going to speak to this. But I guess there are some unknowns out there, and we could, you know, we don't know as far as the full-time employees, the FTEs that we have for this coming year, exactly what that's going to look like. And so I guess as a board, Dr. French is saying, you know, we need to think about this. We have talked about this in years past and months past. Just try to think about the immediate future and then also the long-term future as it relates to our budget and our priorities. And so I guess that's something we need to think about. But as far as our projected, I guess, Dr. French, my question is, so if Hortensia becomes a full-time employee of the Caldwell School District, how do you anticipate the community schools program might grow, and how would that affect our budget in the future?
Sure. Madam Chair and Vice Chair Manning, and so to speak, we have to have a vision, you know, and it may take us, like, you may have a vision board of what we would love to see happening. It may take us longer than a year, may take up to 5 years, but we need to, the vision that Hortensia has shared with us is like, we would like to see it grow. We have federal dollars that are not tied to, you know, a teacher salary or anything like that. So there's some federal funds that we can use to bring Hortensia on. And we also know that there is a staff at Canyon Springs doing this work. So we want to provide support for them to continue the work. And then maybe someday we'll be able to have another individual like a Hortensia supporting them. But they are doing the work. They come to Hortensia and they visit with her. She's a great resource, you know. So I can't say that, you know, and it might be a while. It could be 3 to 5 years before we see it to the level that Hortensia has brought to Sacagawea. But we can still continue the work, and we can still reach out to the counselors at the schools and help. I mean, Hortensia has made these connections in our community, and she can share that. And eventually we'll be at a point where we can grow it. I believe we can.
And also the really important word is the connector. And when you have someone that primary responsibility is to connect families to resources in the schools, that's naturally, I mean, we don't have evidence of this probably yet, but naturally it's going to bring students into where those trustworthy resources or connectors are. So it's going to increase our enrollment, I believe.
I hope so.
Yeah, I see it. I agree with you, Trustee Swastika. I think it's a bonus. And we asked Paul, I don't know if it was a year or 2 years ago, just like, has it improved attendance? Do you see, and Paul has pretty good attendance here at Sacagawea. So you're like, how is this, have you seen a better family engagement? But what I think you've seen is families who weren't engaging. You know, the trust, building that trust, which takes time.
It's improved attendance for kids we've worked hard with. It has taken hard work to improve attendance for some of those kids. And so the question is whether we want to invest that, and I personally do.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's we were talking, I was on lately, we've heard a lot about return on investment. Preschool is a great return on investment. And sometimes we want to make sure our legislators understand this is a great return on investment for this small amount of funding. We're going to get this return, and we might not see that return until that individual goes on to middle school or goes on and graduates from high school. But there is a return on investment, and I really believe that with community schools. it's just not necessarily in a dollar amount, right? It's in a person's well-being.
What about you, trustee Butler? Your children come to the school.
I
How do you
do,
feel?
or they do. So, so yeah, I get to see firsthand what Mr. Webster and Hortensia do. And it's fantastic to see the excitement and the communication. You know, there's that saying, if you can't over communicate, and the amount of things that the school puts out, notices and emails and everything about all of the activities and everything that happen around here. It's overwhelming, but it's great to see, because every one of those is an opportunity for somebody to take advantage of that. And so, you know, if it's helping any of our kids, then it's a great thing to be doing. So I thank you both for doing it, and yeah, I think it's a great resource for everybody to have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Hortensia. We appreciate your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, for the time. And I just love what I do. And so I am fully committed to being able to do the best job I can and to really share the wealth of knowledge.
Thank you. And I probably should have, and thank you, Mr. Webster, for your presentation as well. And I probably should have said in the very beginning that we wanted to welcome everybody to Sacagawea. We are at Sacagawea Elementary. We're up on the hill. And so this is where we're having we're guests of Mr. Webster here at Sacagawea, and this is where we're holding our meeting tonight. So if it looks a little bit different, it is. Don't adjust your TV. It is different. We're in the library, the media room for Sacagawea. So I forgot to say that in the very beginning. And so if this was just an update, correct, on community schools update. So thank you. And next on our agenda is our budget discussion. So we have Ms. Burton here to tell us about something that's going on with our budget. So Ms. Burton.
Thank you, Madam Chair and trustees. Really tonight, I'm here to give you a financial update. There's a lot of discussion about what is happening with state funding, what's happening with federal funding, and we thought it would be a good time to discuss these things with the board, just to give you an idea of where I think our budget is going to end at the end of the year, due to the changes in state funding, what that impact will be. I'll be giving you a very preliminary projection of where I think we'll end the year. And again, I normally do not do a budget projection this early in the year. It is truly much closer to April or May. But I thought it would be important for you to see the impact of where these state funding revenues are going to have on us. I'm also going to provide a report of state and federal funds that we have. And then we'll talk about the ESSER 1, which we previously referred to as CARES money, and the new ESSER 2 funding that we'll be receiving. And on the board packet tonight, there is a allowable usage of funds. So this was included in the board packet. What I have on the slideshow was not included, but we will be updating that with Keely, so it will be available out on Board Docs, so it can be seen by the public. But tonight, Caleb is going to help me work my magic. The first item to look at is where I think our foundation, it's our foundation program calculation. And this really is what we receive, and we project what our state funding how it will end up. I believe this is a worst case scenario, because if you'll recall last year, the governor withheld 5% of the allocation that was the appropriation that was given to us by JFAC at the end of the legislative session. And there's been a lot of conversations that have happened since that 5% withholding, and then coming back into this legislative session, and what could be done, what couldn't be done. And with there are certain items in statute, the career ladder funding for salary-based apportionment for teachers is something that is in statute. So that was reinstated by the governor, but the issue was there needed to be a zero impact on the revenue. It wanted to be a net zero. So what was given to us by the career ladder increased funding and leadership premiums, which are both in state statute, along with the 2% increase for classified administrative salaries, those are driven in statute. So in order to make it a net zero impact, is our discretionary funding is being decreased. And so when you look on the slide and you have a copy of the PowerPoint, you can see that we have the original budget that the board approved based on what our original projections were. And then I have provided a projection where I think our actual revenues will come in for state funding. And I won't go through line by line unless you want to, after we go through this. You can see there, our discretionary funding is being decreased by $1.7 million. And we receive X amount of dollars per support unit. And that is the biggest impact for our district, is that discretionary funding decrease. And what comes out of our entitlement is listed as entitlement because that's what's on the state reporting. But we all refer to it as discretionary funding. But really what we pay with our discretionary funding is our health insurance for our staff, our utilities. Those are the items that we use for that funding stream. And you can see that as a big impact. Salary-based apportionment is what we're projecting for the increase in the career ladder, the increase with the advanced rung on the career ladder. You can see the variances between the different line items. We are projected to receive $461,000 more than I had originally projected in transportation. And I believe that is a direct result of the payment that we made last fall. So that's a huge impact and an offset to our overall funding. But of course, that money is spent on transportation, and it still does not cover what we project our transportation cost to be. So that is our total support based on the foundation payment. The next line from 18 down, the items that are listed under number 18, which we consider other state support, which is your leadership premiums, your bond levy equalization monies, your English language funding, IT staffing, professional development, all of those items typically are all restricted line items, right? So the items that are, the lines that are highlighted in green, that money does not go into the general fund. That money stays in a different fund. So it's state technology money, your safe and drug-free money, your school building maintenance match. Those aren't even part of the general fund. This other funding is part of our general fund, but really it's restricted. We have to report to the state how we spend it. If you don't use it, you lose it the next year. So there's adjustments to be made. So the real takeaway from this report is that we will be losing $1 million in state revenue that's available to spend on salaries and utilities and health insurance and coaching stipends and you name it. So that, to me, that's a huge takeaway. And if there's no questions on that, if you'll go to the next page, this truly is, like I said, it is a preliminary estimate of where I think we will be based on what we know today. And this is where you can see the impact of that reduction in the state funding. You can see that in the third column that says our approved, this is what the board approved back in June for our approved budget. You can see line item by line item, but you'll see that our revenues they will be down over $800,000. I'm projecting the 800,000 because there'll still be some adjustments coming in because this is where you see those additional items like leadership premium. So that other state support, that was an increase, right? But leadership premiums must be paid out to teachers. So the net effect of our revenues is around $800,000. And then again, looking at our salaries, benefits, where I'm anticipating that we will end the year. And it's so soon to start doing these projections. But it's a best guess today of where I think we'll end. And because our expenditures are down this year, you can see that I had budgeted 23,300,000 in salaries, but so far, but what I'm projecting currently is 22.5 million. And the reason that we are lower, the reason that my projection is lower is because we've not been able to hire the staff that we need due to our reduced students and just the market. We have a lot of open positions across the board, and we've just not been able to hire people. So that's part of the reason that our salaries are down from what we had originally projected.
Mostly classified staff.
And it is mostly classified staff. We have filled all of the certified staff that we had anticipated hiring in all of our different funding streams. So the good news is I had projected that we would reduce our fund balance by 1.6 million. Now it's better. It's still a reduction of $800,000. But so that's where my preliminary projections are based on what I know today. Based on all this information, where our projected expenditures are and where we are with the state revenues. Are there any questions? I know it's fast and we can certainly, I can talk all night. I think Dr. Fridge told me I had 10 minutes, so I'm really trying to cram down. I'm kidding. Whatever questions you have, I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
So are we, as far as staffing levels, like, there's a number of classified staff who said you haven't been able to hire. How will that affect how our schools run, like for the rest of this year and into next year?
That's a great question. Where I think that we've not been able to hire is the instructional aides, especially in the special education realm. We still have openings there. And because we've not had all of our students back in the classroom at one time, we haven't needed to hire what we would typically hire as far as overflow aides, because based on the master agreement, if the class sizes are of a certain level, we provide additional support to the classrooms. But because our numbers were so much lower, obviously our enrollment numbers were lower, and because we were doing split days at every level, we haven't needed to hire those additional staff. So some is just a matter of not having the need that we had projected, for one. The other thing is not being able to hire people. Another area that has impacted us is our sub cost to date. In a normal year, our sub cost, and again, remember, this was last June when we thought we were going to open in green and everything was going to move on and it was going to be great, right? So that was what the budget was based on. What does a typical year look like with our absences and students attending school? So our sub costs have been down up to now, but I am anticipating that once we go back with the elementary full-time, the full classes, I think we will probably have maybe more absences than we've had. I'm not sure. This is a best guess, and that's what it is right now. We'll have a better idea after we get back into school for March or for April. I'll be able to give you an update in early May to see where we are. But that's the area where our numbers are down for cost. And if Jody, if you can think of anything, or Dr. French or Patty, that I'm missing, please jump in.
The only thing I would add is it's a very educated guess, based on trends, based on where we've got, based on, it's very educated. If anything, April knows how to project. And decimals and commas sometimes throw her off, but she can project.
Oh, we're such a good family group. No, but it's true. So I feel confident putting this out there, but again, it'll constantly be updated to see where we're at.
And the one thing, trustee, vice chairman and trustee madam chair, I think that has been very good for us is that we've kept our food service, our child nutrition staff has stayed on.
Mm-hmm.
So we have not had a big turnover there because they've stayed on to help. That may or may not create an issue as we go forward, but that's where some school districts are struggling a bit, is getting some of these people back that they may have laid off. And we do contract services with the transportation, so we're not looking for bus drivers. It's I would say, special education support staff is our that will be our barrier as we move back.
And what this, right, this is the general fund. This is where we have the most flexibility. So that's what I'm talking about today. This is what's impacting our general fund. And we're hoping that once we can hire people, once we have a schedule that, how do I say this? It's a typical year. A lot of people have not been willing to take a job when there was some flexibility. I think because of maybe being remote, services not needed. I think there's a lot of factors that have gone into play this year for people wanting to work for school districts, period. I think that's been around the state. I think if you read all of the Idaho Ed News articles, every district is looking for people in some capacity or the other. So we're not alone in this, but I think maybe we'll start to see some change when we come back from spring break. I don't know. And hopefully we can go into next fall in more of a normal schedule. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to start gearing up with our staffing over the summer, over the spring and summer, anticipating for next year.
I want, Madam Chair and Trustees, one more item of interest. So we've already opened up for registration. We had our first new student registration kindergarten roundup option or whatever opportunity last Wednesday. And Caleb, and visiting with Caleb today, we're also starting our returning student registration. That window is open. It's online, but Keeley has accepted phone calls from individuals and just encourage them to either go online and register or to even contact their school. So we're starting to, we're starting early so that we can generate a better idea, better picture going into the fall.
Of our student enrollment, what we anticipate. So it's something new that we're really pushing to get parents.
You may have received a postcard encouraging you to register your new kindergarten, or tell your neighbor, because there are kindergarten students that we didn't see this year, and so we sure want to make sure that we get them in their school and get them ready for next fall.
The next slide, and the next page in your handout really is just a recap of where we are with all of our different state and federal programs. I know we don't spend a lot of time, we haven't in the past spent a lot of time, and we'll change that. I will implement new reporting in place for you in your board packet so you can see what's going on with our state and federal funds. And I created this for us to know, for the district leadership to see where we are with our different funding sources. Several of these are state funds, like we have special projects, which is where we put monies from local grants. We received a music grant for $35,000 that went there and will be dispersed in the schools. Of course, driver's education is self-explanatory. The career technical and is there. That's those CTE funds come in based on the students that are taking the classes. We have another state program, safe and drug-free programs. So let me go back up. State technology is one of the funds that took a big hit this year. It was reduced pretty significantly in our budget, and it is not anticipated to come back next year. They're telling us that it should, by FY23, we should see those funds reinstated, but we'll see when we get there. And probably because there were additional funds that were provided through CARES or ESSER monies that could be spent on technology. There was a technology grant that we received of $331,000. So that helped us with responding to COVID to buy devices for our students. But again, just a listing of all of our different federal programs. We have a lot of carryover this year that we normally would not have. So it was really important to see what our allocation is currently.
and how much money we were able to carry over into the school year. And the reason we were allowed to do that is because of, school going completely remote in March. We didn't have the time to spend the funds, which we normally would do, and the state allowed us to carry over in excess of what would be traditionally allowed. And that's why we wanted to show you what can we carry over going into next year. And not every, there's limits on almost all of the federal funds as far as how much you're allowed to carry over. And that's what those dollars are out there. And there's a spending deadline. And I think that is really important for us to see when we have to have these funds spent and what our plans are. Again, everything at the very top of this section is standard. Those are standard federal funds that we receive every year. And the question came up earlier about Hortensia, and we would be using Title IV funds because community school liaison, community school expenditures are an allowed expenditure out of Title IV. Because each of these programs in here really have restrictions on how we can spend the money. Again, we can't just spend it on anything. Title I, I'll let Jody, she can give that she can tell you exactly what those can be spent on.
Title I's the basic services, math and reading. Comes to us on a formula grant based on our census of poverty. We get a per pupil amount, and then we allocate out a majority of it to the schools, and that covers staffing as well as professional development and supplies, as well as what we do at the district level for PD, but it's geared directly toward those that are at risk in the areas of math and reading. This district is unique. It's the first district I've worked at that they fund every school K-12. Usually it's a K-3, if not a K-5 formula that we fund. And I think as you look across the state, we are unique in the fact that we fund the K-12 system with our title. The carryover is large. I'm sorry, Mr. Manning. The carryover is large only because of the work that we do in April, May, and June of last year. We had to write to the state to ask forgiveness on that, which they granted. We were able also to, because of the cuts in technology this past year, Title I was able to pick up a majority of what those softwares were, like our testing. We picked up school data, we picked up things that Caleb usually picks up. We were able to pick it up this year for a 1 year deal. Well, I just drew a blank. Usually I'm very off the.
You're right, no, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so title is that will get spent, and it will get spent within this year. It's my philosophy that it's generated based on this year's kids, so it gets spent in this year on our kids. And what we do is we have every school put together a proposal of needs, and then they write SMART goals to those needs, and that's what the allowable budget goes to, is making sure we satisfy those needs.
And the federal fiscal year is from October 1st to September 30th. So that's why some of these have different spending deadlines for these funds. So that's just a general, just for your knowledge, state funds are June 30th. We'll bore you with all the details, but we'll go down to the ESSER 1, the CARES money. You can see what we received in ESSER 1 funds. And we were on track to have this spent. Most of it spent during this year. But what happened is when did we get governors, the COVID monies? We received additional funds. We received $1.9 million from the governor that had a spending deadline of December. So expenditures that we had allocated to the CARES or ESSER 1, the CARES Act, we moved those over to the governor's COVID monies. So it's been moving expenditures are all allowable expenditures. They all have to be in response to COVID. That is really the big issue with the ESSER 1, CARES money, coronavirus, distance blended learning, ESSER 2, and the governor's money. So those all have to be in response to or related to COVID. So we moved some expenditures around.
And primarily because of the expiration date.
Absolutely. Because that had to be spent by December 30th. But then, of course, after the beginning of the year, they extended it, but we've really already spent all that money, and you'll see that's the last line item on the page. So we were, and there's no limit for carryover for these ESSER funds, but they all have to be spent by that spending deadline. And so you can see, we still have funds available for our learning management system that we'll be spending here. Well, the money's been spent, we'll be drawing down the money. Because these are on a reimbursement, right? The state funding, we're just given the checks. We're given advances in August, November, and then February and May and July. Those are our state funding, and we are just given those funds. But with the majority of these, all of the federal programs, including the ESSER and the coronavirus, those are reimbursements. So you have to spend the money to get the money. So it's an interesting dynamic, and if something isn't allowed, it'll be denied. And so we have to be very careful to make sure that we are following the guidelines of the use of funds. Because we don't have the money in our general fund to absorb these expenditures if they're not allowed in these funds. So it's really important that we are cognizant of what we're doing. We have a good plan of how we want to spend those funds.
We've got a great system in place too for checks and balances. That not one person can write a PO and approve it.
Right.
To go through the process.
We have a Jody and I are involved, I think, in every federal program funding stream. Dr. French is involved in some of these other funds. So it starts at the school level in a lot of cases, and then it goes through the approval process from the principal to Dr. French, to Jody, myself. So we're all looking at all of those expenditures in some areas. With the ESSER 1 and 2, Jody and I are very much involved in how we're spending this. And as a district leadership, we decide how we're going to spend those funds. So not only how we're going to spend them, but who's approving those expenditures.
I have a question about technology.
Trustee Manning, yes, please.
So as you look towards this coming school year, how does the district see the 1-to-1 device ratio? Are kids going to hang on to devices? Are seniors going to take devices with them? Are we going to, do we have enough money for new devices, that kind of thing? Are we going to stay a 1-to-1 district? You guys have any thoughts on that?
Who wants to take this? Well, that's Chair Pacina, Trustee Manning.
I'd be happy to. So I'm happy to. Yes, Madam Chair and Vice Chair Manning and trustees. So we've been meeting with Caleb, and our anticipation is that we have a very good thing going. But we also have to talk about how those devices do wear out. And they do have to be changed and they have to be updated. But our anticipation is that we will continue to be a 1-to-1. We see technology our teachers have done a fantastic job, and the work that they've done and what students are able to do with their computers today, what they're able to create, the problem solving, the collaboration, we don't want to lose that momentum. Now, we have not talked about seniors taking them, and I'm thinking, I don't know exactly what you're implying as they graduate. Here's your Chromebook.
I couldn't remember what the district was going to do with seniors and 1-to-1 devices. I couldn't remember if we had promised them to seniors or if they were going to stay the devices.
Oh, thank you. Vice Chair Manning, we have not. So we anticipate that we've checked them out and they'll be returned to us. We'll inventory. Caleb has plans for an inventory, how that's going to look. And then we plan to reissue them next fall to students. Now, there may be students who will need them over the summer that will check them out. And we plan that that it will be just like a library book or resource, that's something that they use, and it will be, I don't see us moving away from an e-learning opportunity, even when we are back in school full-time. I see teachers using this as collaborative opportunities for students. Go ahead, Jody.
I think too, trustees, that Dr. Farrell, we have, she is our digital integration specialist that has been doing amazing things this year. And usually the difficulty with introducing a piece of technology is making sure it's not a substitute for a textbook or a substitute for a worksheet, that you're actually integrating that technology into the learning process. And Dr. Farrell's done an amazing job working with teachers and continues to work with teachers and students to make sure that it's becoming part of an integration, not just a substitute. So I don't see that going away.
I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I had a question on, just because, you know, it's the one item that stands out, the -1 for Medicaid.
Yes.
So
So
I
we're
was just. if you could-
currently, again, this is current as of January 31st of how much we had received in Medicaid funds. But I anticipate that based on our current billing progress that we're making, that we will cover, that it won't be a negative.
Okay.
And if it is, I'll be talking to you about that later. Because if you recall, we had to make some adjustments last year because we were no longer billing, but we still have been able to bill to provide services. And so I feel very confident that it will be positive, but I'll keep you up.
We are on track.
Oh, that, China, thank you. Oh, yes.
You're welcome. We're on track to hit that.
Loud. Thank you, China.
Well, isn't that kind of like a zero fund balance? I mean,
It is.
we want it to be a zero out. What we bring in, we're able to pay out.
Absolutely. And China and I have a lot of conversations about it, making sure that we're on track. She has worked very closely with her providers to ensure that they're billing timely, because there's nothing worse than being in May and seeing that you have a negative balance of $500,000 and it's because they haven't billed. That's not been the case with China. So let me just say that in a previous district life that I've been involved in, that has been a concern. So we're really on track. So China's done a great job in working with her service providers for billing. So it's a zero. We just want to cover our costs with the billing.
Okay, and so, you know, we started out this little meeting, or this part of the agenda that, you know, the discretionary funding was gonna be $1.7 million less. Right, so my question, you know, and unless I missed something in the explanation, but, you know, are you sleeping okay at night, April? Are we okay?
I'll
or,
send you
you
my
know?
doctor bills, my ulcer. No, just kidding. No, I'm not sleeping well, but I will tell you I'm not. Because it's very concerning, right? Actually, this was a great exercise to really put this down to paper. And again, I truly hope this is the worst case scenario. Because when you look at that entitlement or discretionary funding, right? There's been a lot of numbers that have been discussed between the 27,556 that was originally allocated to the 21,730. I'm hoping that there's going to be an increase there. So that's why I'm hoping this is a worst case scenario.
And that's a unit cost.
Yeah, that is per unit. So the units is the 283.69. So, and again, don't want to get too much into the weeds, you know, but that's still a protected unit. But so as we know, going through the, March 12th, and we understand that that's when JFAC will be setting the education budget. So we have a few more weeks to know what we might be receiving, what we should be receiving. So we'll be able to update this after that March.
Okay.
JFAC meeting.
And pardon me, Madam Chair and Trustee. So April referred to this. This is in board docs. This is the guidance that we have been given, that how we can use those ESSER funds. So you're hearing legislators talk about how you can use these ESSER funds to backfill what the state's cut. We don't believe that is necessarily true. Federal programs, there are, on here, you'll see that there are 15 ways you can use those funds, but there's still controversy over what you hear legislators say they can be used for, and what federal programs are saying, that extra money that we have quite a bit coming to our district. It's very limited on the use. I mean, it has to fit, and it has to be COVID related.
To preventing, preparing for, and responding to COVID-19. It's very specific in the language of how we can spend these funds. So there are certain restrictions, actually, even though it says there's a lot of uses, but it has to be tied to a COVID
And I have a whole political idea on it, but I don't want to, I think I'll probably just leave that in my own mind. And just share with you, you know, we do want to meet with you to talk about how to use those ESSER funds most effectively to benefit the children of Pueblo. Knowing that there are dates that, you know, by the time it needs to be spent. We've talked about summer break academies, we've talked about maybe some support staff that, you know, that can help through this first few years of helping kids get back on track. But really, there's quite a few conversations that we need to have with you, and we've generated some thoughts of like, okay, well, there's this, and does it fit in what? Does it fit in one of those 15? So we still have a big conversation to have.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's still conversations that we've heard about at the state level. And again, I don't know, I'm hoping by March 12th, we'll have a better idea if there was going to be additional funds allocated by the governor, because states also were given additional funds. And there was a discussion, would that be a summer program? You know, so again, as you receive different funds and they have different deadlines and different purposes, we want to be very cognizant of that we're taking advantage of all the funds that we have available to us and stay within the purpose of the allocation of those funds. So sometimes it's just a little bit of a waiting game. But right now, I mean, with the COVID monies, we bought a lot of PPE, we bought some additional cleaning equipment that we hadn't been able to afford. And so just to help us with the purposes of cleaning the schools. So,
well, and devices.
oh, yeah.
That's been our
devices.
number one expenditure was devices.
For students and staff, so that we could be in remote learning. So that's how we've spent these dollars.
And I don't know if you remember, trustees, when we had our convention in November, our Zoom convention, I know that ISBA leadership talked about, you know, the hard conversations that we might have to have in the future due to the funding, the reduction of funding. And so, you know, this should really not come as a surprise that, you know, that we're here, but, you know, hopefully, conceivably, maybe we'll have some money somewhere.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and trustees. I think the one thing that we need to be cognizant of, and when making decisions to fund long-term expenditures or short-term money, that is something that, right, this is one-time money. This will go away. You know, wise person told me, do not put short-term one-time money into staff and salaries that are ongoing. Now, we may come back and ask for different staff members, knowing that these are somewhat temporary positions. These are positions that we are anticipating that would go away once things get back to normal. But that is why we really look to that state funding to fund our consistent ongoing salary schedules for our certified staff and our classified staff and our administrators. These are good for one time. You know, if you recall, you approved us giving our staff a payment. We hold the COVID payment in November for all the additional work that they had done. And that was an allowable and a great use of the governor's money, because everyone had just been working so hard. And so we were very thankful that you approved that and that we were able to pay the one-time stipend, if you will, to the staff. It was a one-time payment, nothing went in the salary schedule. And I think that's hard for everyone to hear is you see that we have all this money, right? And people said, well, give us raises. You should be able to give us a raise because you have all this additional funds. But unfortunately, this is not ongoing money. You know, unless the federal government comes out and says, okay, we're going to give you this for the next, you know, then we may think differently. But right now, we will stick to our plans of using these for one-time expenditures.
Because we can't give a raise. We can't give a raise and then take it away.
No.
The next year.
No,
I
right.
think that same person that gave you that advice, gave you advice and said, don't put a dead fish in the trunk of your car on a hot summer day.
I think they did. I think I've heard that before. Absolutely. And so I hope this was beneficial. I hope, you know, after you've had a chance to mull it over and you want to
call me with questions. I'll be happy to give more information if you need. Unless you have any more questions?
Trustees, any more questions, thoughts, comments?
I've got a question, I guess, with the last levy that we passed. Is that providing a buffer for our budget, or will that?
So if you go back to the second slide. Sorry, this one. Yep, that one. You can see that if we did not have that supplemental levy of $4 million up there, so supplemental levy is the second line. It says available fund balance, and then underneath that is supplemental levy 4.1 million. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 lines down. That is a buffer, Trustee Manning. We would not have. We would have $4 million, and we would be in the hole.
So I guess we could really thank our patrons as well for trusting the district. They did pass a large levy, and it is helping us out here in these uncertain times.
Thank you. You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct, because if we did not have that, we would be slashing a lot of positions, right? Because that's it. Our fund balance I'm projecting is going to be $3 million at the end of this school year, and without that $4 million, we wouldn't have one, and we would be making a lot. We would have to make a lot of adjustments to staff, because when 85% of your budget is in salary and benefits, that's the only place you can go. And so that would have an impact. And we do have some hard discussions going forward, right? Because of our numbers, and that's what we've talked about all along this year. As our enrollment numbers have continued to decline, we're generating, even though on an enrollment-based funding model, our numbers are considerably less. And so that is going to be some conversations that, I get to be the bearer of bad news. That's who I am. But those are the conversations we have to have, because we're not going to have that state funding. And the supplemental levy is a 2-year levy. So this is our first year of collecting the 4.1. We have 1 more year. And then next year will be, the board will decide how we want to go to the patrons and what we want to request, right? Because we have to start thinking about that to run our election. And if the August date is taken away, we really have November of 21.
Yeah.
We have March of 22 and May of 22. And as I told you, May of 22 is almost too late to run an election just because of budget preparation. So that leaves us November and March to really think about next school year. So you're right, we're very grateful that our patrons did approve that this last year.
And I think April, she's pointed out that the money from ESSER cannot subsidize what our supplemental has helped us do. Right, because it is, again, soft money, and it has to be used in a specific way. It is very challenging when it comes to staffing and the supplemental. Oh, hopefully you feel more informed than you were.
Okay, trustees, if you have no more comments. Our next agenda item, moving on, is the district continuing school operation plan for 2020 to 2021 school.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when we met last Monday, I said I would try to give you a little update on what we're, meetings and task force and who we've seen visiting with. So we have met with the elementary principals, and in that elementary principal group are basically most of the members of April's group. Paul and Richard served on the school operation plan. And the other individuals who served on the school operation were mostly secondary administrators. Bernie.
We had Bernie and Bonnie. Thank you, Dr. French, for maintenance and child nutrition, Bonnie,
And then we had 3 secondary administrators.
So we felt like school operations actually had they had a meeting when we had met with the elementary folks. So meeting with those principals and they're meeting with their teams and gearing up for March 29th. We meet with the CEA tomorrow afternoon, after school. And then on Wednesday morning, we have a meeting with our superintendent council, which is our teacher representative from each of the schools. So that's where we're at this point in time in discussing the March 29th for elementary. And I added some things to board docs, updates from Southwest District Health for your information.
We also had 7 members of the instructional task force at that same meeting. So we were able to do 2 task force meetings in one with all of the elementary principals as well as the specialists like China and Shani and Tamara.
Oh, thank you. Mhm. That's my update from last Monday.
Okay. Trustees, any questions that you would like to ask Dr. Sarge?
I will say we plan to have like the plan, the amendments like we have done. Trying to get all that after we meet with these other groups, get that all squared away for the March 8th meeting.
Okay. Okay, so now we have, our next item is future agenda items. Anything, trustees, that you'd like to see added to our agenda for the next meeting? And just know that, you know, if you do have any ideas or any items that you'd like to have added, you can always talk to Dr. French, right? And we can add it to the agenda. Yes. sir.
Madam Chair, the question about the gun safe, would you want that at a regular meeting? Would you like that at a work session?
Because I don't know if we would want to, we'd like to do it information only first, and then, you know, if we needed to add, do an action item later at a regular meeting.
So we could do it at the work session for March,
Uh-huh.
if you wanted, or works, and then by the April meeting, that gives you time to roll it over.
So how about
That
we
a
do work
thought?
session?
Because that was on the last agenda as a future agenda item, but Keely and I were talking about, did we set a date? for that?
We didn't set a date. She was gonna set a date.
Okay, so you're okay with
We
that?
just said sometime in
Yeah.
the next few months,
Mhm.
so
That's
we
true.
weren't sure if it needed to be in March, or if it could wait,
Yeah, we
and
could
then,
do
April or May.
work session in March, and then.
I mean,
Is it
with our
information?
school safety plan coming up soon. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it could be part of that as well.
Sure, and trustee Godina. Sorry. I did visit with Bernie, April, and Caleb were visiting today. And what we'd like to do, we're meeting with Elliot from the Idaho Safe Schools. I better make sure I said that right. Just to review our plan. And so what we thought, is like at the June work session is just to go over it. Like, because Bernie, I mean, schools have plans.
Uh-huh.
But Bernie, I mean, what we can do is put it into a one-stop shop for you.
Mhm.
So he wanted to have a chance to meet with them. We've talked to
Mhm.
Caleb about the communication system across the district, and so.
And if I remember correctly, Vice Chair Manning, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe if we go over it, it will need to be an executive session due to the safety and the nature of having it be confidential for our school. And so it would have to be, if I'm not mistaken.
I can't remember honestly. I'd
You
have
know
to
what,
look
let's
at that.
actually double check it.
Okay,
I can
if
see
you could.
why
Yeah.
we'd want to,
Mhm. And I think I believe I remember that from one of our trainings with ISBA that,
Yeah, I remember that.
that they
well,
like to have it in
that-
an executive session, so.
how do you feel about, like, if we go at the the July work session, where we've had the day, we can
Mhm.
take part of that day,
Yes,
make it an executive session,
Mhm.
if that's,
that would
are
be
you okay
good.
with that? Is that time frame?
Yeah,
Okay.
Mhm.
and that's for everything, is that correct?
It would, yes, we would go
Okay.
over, we were talking about today, all the things that,
Yes.
Or part of.
It just makes
Part of that
sense
safety
putting
plan.
everything, putting both of those things together.
Oh, okay, so maybe moving moving the presentation for the gun safe to.
Oh,
To
okay.
To June, just so
Okay,
it's
so
all
just-
together.
Okay, so in July, have Officer
Mhm.
Phillips come out
Yeah.
or Lieutenant Holden?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. July, work, the
Or-
July retreat.
A retreat, where we go river rafting.
When we're gonna go river
Just
rafting down
joking.
the Payette.
I'll wait for you at the end.
Just
Oh,
kidding.
barbecue.
A retreat.
Okay, so we'll move it,
Okay.
so we won't plan on that in March, but in July and.
Okay.
Okay.
An executive session. That's an review. That's an item that is exempt. I've been advised that is an exempt item, exempt from public records, so we can review it.
Okay.
And that way we'll have some updates. I know Caleb's been working now on just how we communicate across the district and to be more effective.
Dr. French and Madam Chair Pacina, so would Keely be getting a hold of the SROs?
Yes,
And-
yeah, either Keely or I will talk
Okay.
to Officer Phillips.
Yeah.
Or in an, or even, because both Officer Phillips and Lieutenant Holloway had reached out to me.
Okay,
So I'm happy to reach back out to them and or Keely.
okay, great. I appreciate that.
Okay, good. So we got that on the squared away with future agenda items. Okay.
Madam Chair, I've got one thing.
Yes.
Do we know, we're gonna change the superintendent evaluation process? Do we know when we're gonna meet to
Oh,
discuss that next?
yes, Keely, can we get with Chrissy Lamont, our ISBA trainer, so that we can get started on the new process that we're gonna do for the superintendent evaluation? The new process that we're gonna start and when she would be available, so that we can have training on that new process. Thank you for bringing that up. I completely. Okay, so if we can start as soon as possible, that way it'll give us.
The work session.
Yeah, maybe March if we can.
Yes.
And Madam Chair and Trustee, so our next work session, we are at Syringa to take a
Okay.
tour. Shay, or Principal Swan is preparing for us to see all the great stuff. And I don't know if you were able to look at their newsletter that we sent out. It's pretty happening newsletter.
Lots of video.
So
Done
that
at 5. Done at 5.
You know what, does it need to be later so that you are able to be on the tour?
5:30 would work for me.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I think we could probably do a tour with this Shay, or excuse me, Principal Swan to tour in like 30 minutes, and then we could still give him time in the meeting to do some student recognition.
Okay.
Would that work?
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, you can do it at 5 and I'll just catch up, but.
It would be nice to have you included. Yeah.
It's just hard to get out there. you
Yeah.
know.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Dr. Godina. One day, well, that's your brother. Sorry.
I'm not my
That's
brother.
okay. Okay. All right, and so now we have, I'd like to ask we're going into executive session. So let's see, we need to ask, I need to ask for a motion to enter into executive session, please.
Madam Chair, I'd like to take action to go into executive session. Is that the right term?
Make a motion.
Make a motion, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Okay, we have a second. So do we, let's see, do we do roll call and then go and then find out who's gonna enter? Okay, so Madam Clerk, if you could do the roll call for the executive session.
Trustee Claudia Swastiki.
Yes.
Trustee Andrew Butler.
Yes.
Trustee Manuel Godina.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Travis Manning.
Yes.
Madam Chair Maricela Pacina.
Yes. Okay, and then let's see. Vice Chair Manning, could you read the reason for our going into executive session?
For Idaho Code 74-2061, to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, individual agent, or public school student.
Okay, thank you. So could we, Caleb, could you put us in executive session, please?